My name is Stanley Siebert. I've been a professor of labour economics here at the University of Birmingham for more years than I care to remember. And so I'm going to be talking about the labour market and in particular about migration as we go into this election. What should our position be with regard to this vexed migration issue? Now, most people who voted to leave were worried about two things. They were worried about the issue of control from Brussels, and they were also worried about the issue of migration. And so I'm going to look at the second of those things for the moment. Now, taking the economic point of view for a second, migration has benefits and costs. Let's look at those benefits. First of all, the benefits are universal in the sense that if poor people leave the South, Africa, China perhaps, and come to the North, in Britain, they'll make themselves better off because there'll be extra jobs for them here, much higher pay. And they'll make the people at home better off. Perhaps that's harder to imagine, but as people leave Africa and China, so incomes of those left behind will eventually rise, because in a sense there are too many people in the South and not enough in the North. And if you go through this line of reasoning, migration helps both those in the South, eventually. I say eventually because there will be a transition period when all the young people aren't there, and you can imagine difficulties in Africa. But eventually those people in the South will benefit, and of course the migrants will benefit. That's the good side. On the other hand, there is a bad side of migration, and you can see the people who compete with the migrants will suffer. In general, as if we have free migration, it's been calculated that wages will eventually equalize in the North and the South over a long period of time through this mechanism that I've described, but it will require the movement of 5 billion people to equalize incomes, and everyone will be better off on average when this happens. But if you think of 5 billion people moving, you can see the sort of dislocation that will occur. Now, it's this sort of dislocation which has caused people in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and Britain to begin to scratch their heads and worry about the migration, because the fact that we speak English is a great attractor. Now, I have a clipping from a few years ago from one of the newspapers which said that ministers must let in more migrants, because if they don't, food prices will rise by 15%. So migration into this country is keeping wages down for the unskilled. If we look at this clipping says that, which is from the Migration Advisory Committee, the best source, it says that about a third of Britain's 70,000 seasonal farm jobs are filled by Romanians and Bulgarians. This was 3 years ago. And it's predicted that they will move to less arduous roles when they win full EU rights in 2014. So there's going to be a severe labour shortage, which will push up wages and prices. But of course, we want wages to be higher. The reason that seasonal farm labour is paid so badly is because of migration. The reason that nurses are paid badly is because we have so many nurses from Africa. For example, every nurse trained in Malawi was taken last year. Now, we want higher wages for everyone, but particularly for those at the bottom. And migrants are preventing those wages from rising. Of course, food prices will rise. And you might say that that's a bad thing. But they will rise because you're paying the workers to pick the fruit, which the worker needs to be paid what the job is worth. So there's no point in complaining about high food prices because that is what it costs to make the food. Have a heart. Now, there's also when we think about it, about 300,000 people arrived in Britain last year on net. Now, there are disputes about these figures. They include students, which is silly. But it's a high figure. 20 years ago, when Blair came to power, there was about 10,000. Now, clearly, we can't have 300,000 people coming here on net every year indefinitely. We'll be submerged in houses, we'll be submerged in roads, in sewerage farms. Our schools will be dislocated, they already are. And so my advice to Mrs. May is keep up the pressure. We have to reduce the amount of migration. The English language is a great attractor. Whenever I see a crisis in the world, in Africa, in Syria, I think, oh well, they'll soon be coming here because we have the jobs. And of course, we have the stable environment. We're one of the nicest places in the world. But it can't go on.